Hello, folks. This is your ticker guy coming at you with a Medicare and Bernie Sanders and Elizabeth Warren and others skewering, courtesy of my podcast. Let's dig into this thing. This came out of a series of conversations I had on Twitter. The first one was really amusing. It was a claim that Bernie Sanders, of course, is God. This is how these, we've got all these robots out there looking at this. And they by God, anything that you do, they're out there to jump on it, and they're really sure that he's absolutely the answer, and Medicare for all is the answer, and Dylan Ratigan's, sort of on this bandwagon too, and so are a bunch of other people, and, by God, this is just going to fix all the problems. Well, let me point a few things out. First is that the Affordable Care Act was passed in the Senate with 60 votes. Now, I pointed out that it was passed with a majority, all Democrats, and immediately got this scold after me saying that, oh, no, there really wasn't much of a majority. It was only one vote, and oh, by the way, one guy was out because he was dead, and da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da. Do people actually get these kinds of talking points from some bot somewhere or something? Where does this come from? Does anybody know that with 30 seconds you can pull up the actual roll call vote in the Senate for the ACA? I mean, it's really that easy, and it shows that indeed it passed with 60 votes, including both quote-unquote independents, of which Bernie Sanders is one. So that's just a flat lie. And to claim that it was impossible to pass because it was so close, well, actually, no, it wasn't. And it was passed under reconciliation, which means it couldn't be filibustered. Remember, filibusters for most things have been killed. But no, you couldn't filibuster it because it was passed under reconciliation. It only needed 50 plus the VP. It passed with a margin of 10. Now, don't tell me about it being close. Don't tell me about it being hard. It was rammed down our throats, period. All right, second point. There is a lot of screaming going on about Medicare being a price taker. In other words, cannot negotiate, being forced to pay whatever. This is true in exactly one place, and that's Medicare Part D, or drugs. It is false for the entire rest of the program. It has never been true for the rest of the program. In fact, you have a board that meets and sets prices for reimbursements for Medicare, and they are required to provide at cost plus. In other words, they can't ram down a medical center's billing department a price that is below cost. They can't do it. Okay, and there is a challenge procedure if some medical facility believes that that's been done to them. And those challenges get filed all the time. But remember what happens when you have a cost plus contract, folks. All right, you are going to get screwed every time. If I have 200 extra people in my hospital that are pushing paper around and trying to find ways to rape you in the butt financially every time that you are there, that's cost. And if I'm allowed to bill at cost plus, well, we're never going to solve that problem now, are we? Because, again, the hospital administrators, their efficiency is probably based upon how much they bill, what percentage they keep. And, again, if you start trying to be socially responsible, would you like to make 10 or 15% of $1 million, or would you like to make 10 or 15% of $10 million? I think we all know the answer to that question. It's going to be the same for everybody. And so as soon as you get into a cost-plus kind of situation, you're going to do things like buy $400 toilet seats. The bottom line here is that cost-plus anything is nonsense. You always want to be an offer maker. And you want to bid things, and you can't do that if people can charge other people different prices. Now, 15 United States Code Chapter 1 says that monopolizing, attempt, or restraining trade, fixing prices is a criminal felony and carries 10 years in the slam. It's been the law for 100 years. A few years after it was passed, we had some cute monopolists who were prosecuted and said, oh, well, we tried, but we failed to fix prices. Congress turned around and passed the Clayton Act, which says attempting to monopolize is 10 years in the slam. Okay, so that would be the first two sections. If you read through the rest of 15 United States Code, Chapter 1, you'll also find that in there is another law which was at the time called Robinson-Patman, which deals with price competition for physical goods of like kind and quantity. And it says that you may not discriminate in pricing with physical goods where purchasers are buying like kind and quantity if the intent or effect is to reduce competition or restrain trade. It's illegal. This law applies, and incidentally, when I ran MCS, I shoved it up a supplier's butt because they were attempting to charge me more for the same size order of a specific thing that I wanted. I went back and said, excuse me, that's illegal. And guess what? I got the other price. Boy, I wonder why. They didn't want to get sued. These laws have been around for a long time, folks, and they apply. Royal Drug in 1979 was a case that went all the way to the Supreme Court. The medical and pharmaceutical industry tried to argue that because insurance was involved in paying for these things, that made them exempt under another law which exempts some insurance companies under certain circumstances from antitrust. That law is called McCarran-Ferguson. And they went all the way to the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court said, nope, sorry, you lose. The character of what you are doing is a volume purchase agreement. It is not the business of insurance, and therefore you're done. Get out. A few years later, the medical industry took another bite at the apple, Maricopa County, with regards to price fixing among providers of services. They lost that one too. So, folks, for those people who say there's no case law and there's nothing that can be done, that's just total BS. All right, now let's talk math for a minute. The price taker thing is true. In other words, you can't negotiate when it comes to drugs. Last year, Medicare spent $85 billion on prescription drugs. Across the entire United States, we spent about $300 billion, which, by the way, is for Medicare is about 5% of the total. And for the nation as a whole, it's approximately 8 or 9%, maybe 10 now, because it keeps going up. Maybe 8 or 9% of the total spent on healthcare. If you think you're going to solve the entire problem or any significant part of a problem by going after 5 or 10% of it, you're out of your blankety blanking mind, and you should just go find yourself a legal state to get high and buy a great big bowl of something and smoke it on up, boys and girls, because you are being led astray. And those politicians that are focusing in this direction and trying to misdirect you in this way are damned liars. And that includes most specifically Elizabeth Warren and Bernie Sanders. Last year, Medicare, as I said, spent $85 billion on prescription drugs. That's a lot of money. But it spent $1,576 billion in total between Medicare and Medicaid. Of that, only 5% was those prescription drugs. The only way you're going to stop this is when we decide we've had enough of the monopolists and the price fixing. Now, a very simple way to do this is to do two things. No more indirect billing. In other words, if you go into the doctor and he performs a service, you have to get the bill. Now, that doesn't prevent an insurance company from cutting you a check for it, but you have to get the bill. And the second thing is everyone has to pay the same price. Doesn't matter how you pay, doesn't matter who you are. If you go in there because you have strep throat, the doctor wants to charge $100 to see somebody that has strep throat or suspected strep throat, then it's $100. And it doesn't matter whether it's you, it's the guy down the street. None of those things matter. It's $100. Then they have to post that price where everyone can see it. No one in this country would pull into a gas station for $25 a gallon gas when you could buy it for $2.50 across the street. And that kind of nonsense, without you being able to figure it out in advance, goes on every single day. Elizabeth Warren and Bernie Sanders are going to do exactly zero to fix this. And remember, socialism always loses in terms of cost and efficiency to capitalism. And the reason it loses is because that very price signal that has to be there and what's going on in the medical industry and the reason our costs are so high, that price signal is destroyed. Why? Because you never see it. The government pays for it all. And people say, well, the government will negotiate. Well, will they? Are they going to throw those 4 or 5 million people out of work, voluntarily cause a stock market crash, and asset prices to go down? You're going to have 4 million unemployed individuals. Now, they'll find jobs when business adjusts to this, but that's going to be the immediate effect. Do you really think they're going to do that? Well, if they don't do it, then prices won't come down. The only way you're going to do it is if the hospital up the street says you need a cardiac stent put in, it's $4,000. No matter who you are. And you get the bill for $4,000. And this means that when you go to look at prices, average prices for things, and what your insurance covers, now you got something to shop on, don't you? Now you have some basis to actually do things. And if it's a non-emergency, boy, oh boy, you got 3 hospitals. One's a 10-minute drive away, one's a 5-minute drive away, one's a 30-minute drive away. Well, you know what? Hey, the 30-minute drive away one may have better outcomes because that has to be published too, and it's less money. The one that's 5 minutes away isn't going to live very long under that paradigm, is it? Or it's going to have to lower its cost and price. And so all those people that never provide a single second of care to a single person, they're going to lose their jobs. Because, let's face it, what does a hospital exist to do? Push paper or make people better? Well, so you'd keep the doctors and nurses, right? And the janitors, too, because, people do puke in the halls every now and then. But, look, folks, this is not a difficult problem to solve. But none of the people that are on either side of the aisle, not Donald Trump either, all right, because he's done exactly zero to actually make this happen. His so-called proposal with the $300 fine is a joke. But all these people talking about Medicare for all, if you don't have a price signal, you're never going to get these costs down. They should be 1/5 of what they are today. You should be able to buy catastrophic insurance for a person in their 50s for $1,000 a year. And for somebody in their 20s or 30s, where the cost of catastrophic things like heart attacks and strokes and things like that is much smaller, probably cost about $200 or $300. And yet that would cover things such as cancer, car accidents, blah, and on and on and on and on, right? But no. And by the way, why would it be so cheap? Because the cost of the care, if you actually needed it, would be 1/10 of what it costs now. So there you go. Are we going to do this? Because if we don't, folks, at the rate that this cost is growing, by 2024, the government's going to try to spend all of our tax revenues that it takes in, roughly, on this and on interest. And if you think the market's going to let that happen and everything's going to be peachy keen and everything's going to be fine, you're dead flat wrong. So this Medicare for all nonsense, if you do not get costs completely wiped out, you don't get this deficit spending stopped, this is going to blow up. You can't do it with Medicare for all, but you can do it immediately by forcing cost transparency. Will there be a dislocation and will it suck for a short while? Yeah, it will. It would have sucked less 10 years ago, but Barack Obama said he was going to solve this problem. And instead, what he did was he handed another $1 trillion to the health insurance business. And not only that, folks, if you take a look at what's happened to Medicare and Medicaid spending, it has basically doubled since 2008. Doubled. Who did that? Who do you think did that? Got to stop it, folks. Cannot keep doing this. It has to end. And we either do it voluntarily now or we're going to do it very involuntarily in just a few years. Those are the facts. I'll debate this. I'll talk about this with anybody. I don't care. Left, right, center, whatever. Don't care what candidate you are. You want to have an honest conversation about this? Get a hold of me. It's not that hard. You take a guy. And these are facts.